Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I am Shogun. Today we have a special event on serial killers, true crime, and forensic psychology, which is being hosted and led by Sir Anna, much beloved Knight of the Round Table. Before we get started, just please follow us on YouTube and BitChute, where you can find our 160 plus podcast episodes. And most of all, please join the Roundtable Discord server, where you can also find links to all our podcasts, all our social media, and all our other platforms. So that being said, welcome, Sir Anna. How are you today?
I am doing good and quite excited because this is my first podcast ever. So I'm going to start with 3 case studies and then we'll move into open discussion. My first serial killer technically isn't a serial killer, but is labeled as one. Her name is Katherine Knight, and she is known as the female Hannibal Lecter. I'm going to give a short background on her because her past actions lead up to exactly what she did and how she gained this title. She lived in New Wales, Australia. She worked in a slaughterhouse in 1971 in the boning room. Her co-workers said that she was very good with her, dealing with her job, the knives, and she enjoyed it to a frightening degree. So she essentially lived off of a string of bad relationships. It was almost like she liked the abuse and liked to abuse as well. Her first marriage was to a man named David Kay. He was a drunk and he was very prone to fist fights. He would try to beat her, but she would always fight back. Now, when they first got married after her honeymoon, he fell asleep after one round of intercourse. So in her mind, she was okay with strangling him. Lucky for him, he did wake up and was able to fight her off, but he did not divorce her. They stayed together for about 10 years, had, I believe, 2 girls, and then he snuck away in the middle of the night. This ended up having her institutionalized because she went after the mechanic and tried to kill the mechanic that fixed his car because she blamed him for leaving. After that, after she got out of the mental ward, they had depression and they couldn't really label exactly what kind of psychiatric illness she had, but they knew that she was just not right. But David actually came back, and then they divorced shortly after she stabbed him in the chest with scissors. Then she met David Sanders, and they moved in very quickly, but he had 2 apartments. He didn't want to really move in and start a life with her at that point because he didn't trust her because she was very on and off. My guess would be bipolar from her mood swings. Now, it really made her angry. When they got into a fight over it, to prove how angry she was, she picked up his puppy and slit the puppy's throat. Her justification was she was grumpy. Now, she has officially, on record, killed an animal, stabbed and tried to strangle her previous husband. And this man still did not leave her. They ended up having a baby girl together. And then she stabbed him. And I think that is when he left. And then she met John. Now, John and her stayed together for quite a bit. The relationship was really good, so she decided to cheat on him and turn it sour, but he didn't leave. After a few years, a bunch of abuse, getting stabbed, he got a restraining order, so she snuck into his house and stabbed him to death. And when he didn't arrive at work the next day, his coworkers called the police. Now, when the police went there, the first thing they saw through the mail slot was a really dark curtain. So they walked into the house, and what they found was it was actually skin. It wasn't a blanket. It wasn't an actual curtain. It was skin, human skin. They moved the skin aside that was hung up by butchering hooks, and they saw nothing more than a beheaded and skinned torso. Now, where she gets her name, the female Hannibal Lecter, is when they walked into the kitchen, they found his head in a stew cooking. They found that she used his back muscle to make steaks, and she cooked them, and she actually had nameplates for her children where she was going to invite them over for dinner to eat her newly deceased boyfriend. She got caught after this one because she was actually sleeping in bed when the cops arrived. She only killed one person, but the brutality behind it, they labeled her as a serial killer. My next case study will be a cannibal couple from Russia. Dmitry, he was an orphan, and he was shy. Natalia, she was raised with no father, and she wanted to be a doctor. Natalia had one son, and Dmitry had no kids by the time they met. Natalia's husband died. Then she got into drugs and drinking a lot. She institutionalized herself. For the record, this will make sense in a little bit. The way that they were found was Dmitry lost his cell phone on the side of a highway, and construction workers found the cell phone. They turned it in to try to find who it was, and they found a picture of a beheaded woman on a plate, like just her head, I mean. And so they turned it into the police. The police hunted down Dmitry, went to his apartment where he was living with his girlfriend, Natalia. They found multiple body parts everywhere in the fridge. They found wigs that were actually made out of scalped humans. They had been sustaining themselves on human meat for at least 5 years. And their body count was, quote, in the dozens, because they couldn't exactly narrow it down. But they did find hundreds of pictures, Polaroid pictures to be exact, of their victims after they slaughtered them, even their victims at the bar in which they would kidnap them from and then murder them at their apartment. So my third case study will be a Julia Tofana. Now, I threw Julia Tofana in because she is technically a serial killer, but Julia Tofana will make people think about exactly why some people might turn to this lifestyle. Her body count is over 600. She killed over 600 men. But it is questionable if she was in the right of doing so. She lived in a time where women were very oppressed, and if you got married, it wasn't by your own will. Your parents would marry you off, essentially. She became a cosmetician, or whatever you call it when you make makeup. And when she saw exactly how bad women were being abused, she decided to do something about it. She was very good at making, let's say, chemicals that could kill someone, poison, essentially. And she could hide it in the makeup that she made for a living. Now, Julia Tofana was also known as Lola, Lolita. She went by many names. She moved around a lot, and if a woman was abused, they would come to her, and she would poison them slowly and kill them. Her and her daughter were both executed over these crimes because she killed a lot of men. Her body count is believed to be over 600, but a lot of people do question if she was within the right of killing these men, since all of them were abusers of their wives. I will open it up to discussion. Those are my 3 case studies. Let's hear your thoughts.
Well, do we want thoughts or do we want more case studies? Because we can get into like how and why people become serial killers and what motivates them. Or we could discuss a few more serial killers first. So what would you prefer, Serena?
Let's throw in some more serial killers first, and then let's go into the mentality behind them.
Okay, so does anyone have a serial killer in mind they'd like to share a little bit of information about? I do, but... Okay, so I would like to talk about Willie Picton because he's not super well known, but he's a big deal in Canada for all of the wrong reasons, of course. They call him the Pig Man. And Willie Picton is a strange case. He owned a large pig processing, or he owned a big pig farm, right? He was a pig farmer. And he had even his own weird, like, pig-themed entertainment company where he'd have these big raves and parties on his pig farm. But he would basically bring prostitutes over, and I won't remember all the details, but he would do drugs and stuff with them, but he would kill these prostitutes, obviously, and probably worse. I don't know all the details, but he's a monster, right? And I guess he was feeding the bodies to the pigs, because I guess pigs will actually eat a human body. You know what I mean? I think they referenced that in a movie, maybe Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels or something like that. But, I'm trying to find his. So yeah, he's 71 years old, really ugly guy, and sorry, I'm just trying to find his actual estimated number of people that he killed. I guess they don't know. I didn't prepare, but largest investigation of any serial killer in Canadian history, total at least 15, but I think there was a lot more. And yeah, he had ground up the human flesh, mixed it with pork, and sold it to the public. So he didn't just feed the bodies to the pigs. He actually mixed the human meat with the pigs and then sold it to people to eat in Canada. So that's disturbing. I can't give you any more details, but I just wanted to bring him up since he's a Canadian serial killer.
Yeah, for some reason, a lot of serial killers do turn to cannibalism at least some point in their career, like Ed Gein, which is the guy that Chainsaw Massacre is based off of. Ed Gein would mostly prey on travelers, though, so he really didn't get caught until he decided to kill and drain his mom for, I think he said, beef jerky. And he would often make bodysuits, masks. He had nipple lampshades. He had a literal book made of human skin that was like leather. And he even killed enough people to craft furniture like chairs out of their skin and belts and stuff like that. He also liked to collect their fingernails, their eyelids, and their teeth. He was very weird, but he was cannibalistic too, because he would have different body parts that would be in his fridge that they found. I think he had a preserved head. He had a few other body parts, and he was wanting to eat them. Now, it's almost strange how the percentage of serial killers do turn to cannibalism, and you wonder if that is a cause of some sort of mental illness they might have.
That's a good question. Whether eating the human meat would cause a mental illness, because there is a prion disease called Kuru, which is caused by cannibalism. That's like mad cow disease, but for people. But then again, you would have to think they must be mentally ill to eat human meat in the first place, right? So it can't necessarily have been the cause of the mental illness, but I mean, it could certainly worsen it, right? Once you cross that point, you eat human meat, maybe you go crazy like mad cow disease.
Yes, and I know that serial killers also have a tendency of saving trophies, whether it be body parts or a piece of clothing from the person that they killed. Like, there is a guy that, can't remember his name, and he lived in a small country in the UK. And after he killed his first person, in his story, he was only like maybe 17 after he killed his first human. But he wanted their head after he killed them, but he couldn't preserve it properly. So he was very upset. And so he started killing people, not just to kill them, but to have a, perfectly preserved human head. And then he decided, after killing around 20 people, and it was too hard to preserve the head, the skull would just be enough. So he started doing that. But he couldn't so much preserve the skull because it became too brittle. By the time he was able to preserve the skull, he killed an upwards of 50 people and was caught after he, killed, I can't remember who he killed, Bill. It was the daughter of someone that was higher up in the government.
I have a thought that, maybe we could discuss, the different patterns of serial killers. There's kind of templates of serial killers. You mentioned one, which is the tendency to take trophies. And that's actually called a product killer. So a product killer is a serial killer for whom killing itself is not the primary motivation. It's actually just to get the bodies, right? And so in other words, they kill because they have to kill to get the corpse or whatever it is that they want. And I'm not an expert, right? I haven't studied that much true crime, but there's a podcast called The Last Podcast on the Left, which if you haven't heard it, Sarana, if you're interested, I recommend. It's really good, and they cover a lot of serial killers and stuff. It's funny, which is weird because it's so dark, but I think, was it Dahmer? There was one guy who positioned his bodies of his corpses in, well, not his corpses, the victims' corpses, in this position called the Arch of Hysteria. Have you guys seen this? So you made them like arch backwards, and actually Podesta, Tony Podesta, has like a bronze statue of this hanging in his stairwell for some weird reason. But I think it was Gian, right? Who was the one who made the lampshades and all that out of people you were just mentioning?
That was Ed Gian, yes.
Right. So he's a product killer. He made furniture and stuff out of bodies. Now, another type, I can't remember the name, but I think it's like thrill killer or something like that, which is people who, for them, it's the act of killing that is gratifying and that they pursue. Now, I think who is the one who killed little kids and was like a clown? Was that John Wayne Gacy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So people like this, I think he's an example. Some people actually orgasm when they kill somebody, which is really weird. Like just by killing someone, they have an orgasm because somehow those wires are totally crossed in their mind. And so these are people who kill for fun. And then an interesting one is angels of death, they call them. And these are almost always females. And women are different in their pattern of killing than men. You mentioned a woman who was a poisoner, right? So there's an old saying that poison is a woman's weapon. And there's been people in hospitals who are like nurses and stuff who, for whatever reason, they get obsessed with killing people and they start poisoning like their IV bags. And there's been women who have huge kill counts because they've killed so many people in the context of medicine, right? Poisoning as nurses and stuff like that. I had another thought, but I just wanted to lay out that there are like these templates. And then give me a moment and I'll try and remember what else I was going to say. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I understand. Yeah, the different serial killers, and it's very fascinating to me, especially because like you can have people that kill for different reasons, but their crimes are almost exactly the same. With how gruesome they are, should I say, because it's like they get into a certain mindset, and it's not just to kill someone, it is to cause as much suffering as possible. I think one of the only serial killers that has not wanted to harm people would be the guy that did the Cannibal Cafe. I believe he lived in Germany. He didn't want to kill people, but he did want to eat people. But he looked for willing victims, and he made sure they were willing. And he did interviews and had them come over and made sure that they actually wanted to die and da-da-da. I think he's one of the only ones that's a serial killer that didn't want to kill them. He just wanted to harvest their meat.
Yeah, that's extremely disturbing to me. There's been cases, I think in Germany or something, where a person put like an advertisement in the newspaper. I guess probably wasn't the newspaper, but he put like a personal ad somewhere and literally saying like he wanted to cut someone's penis off and eat it, right? And this young man, like probably younger than me, like in his early 20s, answered this ad. And it's very bizarre because the guy had like a girlfriend, like, wasn't known to be mentally ill. And he literally drove out to this guy's farm. The guy gave him some kind of sedative or like medicine, and he, cut off his penis while he was still awake and then ate it. And the guy put him in the bathtub while the guy bled to death, because of course you die if someone cuts your penis off. And he sat there and read a Star Trek novel on the toilet beside the guy as the guy bled to death. So it's like both sides are completely fucked up, but yeah, it's really mind-boggling. Like a man being like, yeah, I want to get my penis cut off and eaten, and it wasn't like some hot girl or something like that. Not that that would make that much difference. Just some weird old guy. It's just like very bizarre.
That's actually the guy behind the Cannibal Cafe. He so there were websites that were set up for this, and they weren't the mainstream web. They would be considered the dark web, and he didn't. So the guy came to his farmhouse, but it was actually more so a mansion. It was a massive house, and he wanted the man to cut his penis off and eat it, and then harvest the rest of him. And I remember he was telling the cops, well, he wasn't dying fast enough, and he was making a lot of, sounds that I didn't like, so I had to slit his throat to kill him faster because he wasn't bleeding out fast enough. But he also was talking about how he actually didn't want to eat the penis, but that was the man's last request, so he did it for him because he was letting him harvest the rest of him. He mostly just wanted like the leaner meats of him, and he was talking about what the consistency of said penis. It is a very odd. That man was very, very odd.
So maybe we'll cover, one or two more of the big conspiracy theories. They're not conspiracy theories. I'm sorry, serial killers that are well known, right? So, do you know anything about John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown they call him?
Actually, yeah. So he's from my home state. He mostly preyed on little boys. It was believed that he raped them before he killed them. He buried their basement. He buried their bodies in his basement, which is where they actually found them. There was an upwards of 20 boys, either young teens to, I think the oldest was 17 or 18. And he felt no remorse for it. He did not care. He used to sell cars on top of being a clown at birthday parties, which is very disturbing. And his last meal was apple pie, fried chicken, fried shrimp, and I think 2 liters of Coke. Like, everyone around here knows him.
Right. Pretty freaking weird. And you've got to wonder how these people are able to, especially if you're killing children, like how are you able to get access to that many children that you can kill? Like, I'm thinking about my kids, like, Jesus, like, I don't know, like, how does that even happen? Like, it's one thing, like one kid walking around outside or something, like, gets picked up, but, aren't people usually taking care of their kids and keeping an eye on their kids? Like, I mean, I guess I could look into it, but it's just shocking. And like you said, that one person has a kill count of 600. It's mind-blowing. I think the worst in terms of kill count, or the highest kill count, was a guy named Henry Lee Lucas, if I'm not mistaken. Have you heard of him, Anna?
Give me what his crimes are, and I could probably tell you, because a lot of their names, I don't remember their names off the bat, but if you tell me what they did.
I think they call him like the hobo. He was a hobo, right? He was a homeless guy. And I think I don't know all the details. Yeah, he has confessed over 100 murders. And I think, they think it's a lot more, but I think he might be one of the most highest murders, like number of murders. The other thing too is, like, back then, so he would just drift around and kill people. Like, I guess back then, there wasn't the degree of sophistication of technology. People didn't have cell phones that you could track the GPS. There wasn't video cameras. So, back then, I guess you could really just be a complete psycho like this guy and just murder people everywhere you went as you drifted around. And, the police, there's no DNA, there's no forensics. How do you even prove it? I mean, think about it. If somebody stabs someone to death with a knife back then and then just drops the knife right there and runs off, even if you get the murder weapon, you can't prove who did it, right? Fingerprints analysis or anything, probably. So, there must have been a lot more serial killers in the past. But one I know that you did want to talk about, you mentioned, was the toy box killer. So do you want to talk about the toy box killer? It's a very disturbing story.
Oh yes, the toy box killer, and then Fisher, because Fisher is a particular case where he actually led his own demise by bragging to. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. So the toy box killer, he essentially didn't start off as a serial killer. He liked sexual gratification from torturing women. The first few times he would do it, he would just release the women because he would drug them so that they really, wouldn't have any memory of the experience. But he rigged um, his basement up to be a torture center where he had a kind of like a gynecologist chair, but had straps on it to hold them down. He would cut them up, insert things that definitely should not have been inserted, record the torture while playing him a tape that he made, explaining exactly what he's about to do to them before he tortured them in the calmest voice. Then it turned into more of a kidnap, keep in the basement, and torture them until they die type thing. He had pits that he would throw the women in that he made in his basement. I think he got in total 7 women in these pits. He would starve them. When one disobeyed him and tried to run, he electrified her to death and then dragged her upstairs and essentially butchered her and started feeding her to the dog he had and the other women, on top of torturing the other women more. One woman died of the torture, and he did the same thing. The way that he was caught in the end was one of the women decided to play as if she loved him and trusted him and just endured the torture that he gave out. And he slowly started letting her come upstairs and take showers and stuff like that because he was planning on marrying this woman because she loved him and da da da. Well, one day she was like, "Well, my family is going to be very scared and call the police if I don't, go home and tell them that I fell in love and I'm going to get married and this and that." So he took her, dropped her off at a gas station so that she could walk to her family's house to tell her parents that she was going to get married. She got there. She called the cops, went back to the women, gave the address of the place to the police when she was on the phone with them, and just waited for the police to come. And that is actually how he got caught. His various torture methods left scarring, just absolute scarring trauma to not only the body, but obviously the mind. When some women couldn't even remember who he was or what he looked like, some of them ended up committing suicide after anyway because of the nightmares, the PTSD, and just everything that he did to them. He was one of the most messed up sex criminals of his time. And then we have Fisher. Fisher is a man that was a pedophile, but he was mostly into raping and then killing and then eating. He killed several children, tortured them to death. One of them, he gouged their eyes out and pretty much slit their face as like from ear to ear, and bled them out while torturing and all that stuff. Really messed up guy. The way that he got caught was he wrote a letter to the mom of one of the boys that he killed. Now, he used to work for this woman, and she recognized the handwriting and turned him into the police. And that is how he got caught. So in both of these...
Sorry. I just wanted to say, sorry, just in case anyone wants to look this character up, the name, I believe it is Albert Fish. Albert Fish. Just rather than Fisher. But other than that, just so people know.
Yes, Albert Fish. In both cases, these men got sexual pleasure from the pain and torture of their victims. And the killing was, well, for one case, one was accidental, one was out of anger. In the other case, it was mainly because he wished to eat them afterwards. So they got most of their pleasure not from killing, but actually torturing their victims.
And that's called sadism, of course, which is taking pleasure in the pain of others. And that's definitely one of the motivations some of these very evil people have. And Poltergeist, you just keep your mic closed, please, when you're not speaking. Thank you. I also wanted to mention something else about the toy box killer that's worth considering. Very, very bizarre and frightening. I couldn't believe it when I read this story. It was truly like unbelievable, because this guy apparently had figured out how to drug, brainwash, and torture people in such a way that he could actually release these women, right? So he was a serial killer, but he really was more of like a sexual sadist who did these horrific sexual things to people for gratification. And then he would actually let them go a lot of the time, right? Like, as you said, they were traumatized for life. But he actually didn't kill a lot of his victims. He released them, but he was able to release them because he had figured out how to brainwash them in such a way that they literally wouldn't remember, right? So all this shit had happened to them, and they'd have, nightmares and stuff like this, PTSD, but they were actually incapable of even remembering what had happened, basically. So I don't know if maybe this guy was like CIA trained or something like that, because, it's very crazy. Imagine this shit happens to you. You get locked in this horrible torture shed, tortured, and then somehow you get out and you actually can't remember it. So it's very advanced in a sick way. And it makes me question, how did he learn that? He just figured it out on his own. But
I believe the way that he, if I remember correctly, the way that he achieved that was he came across.
Did you drop out, or was that me?
I believe she did drop out.
Okay.
Sorry, my headset disconnected. So, the way that he achieved that, if I remember correctly, was he came across a video about hypnotism and the effects that it has on the brain, and decided to try it out for himself and make his own hypnotism audio tape. That's what I'm looking for. I believe that's how he achieved it. And he had a girlfriend. I don't know if people know this. He had a girlfriend when he started all of this.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I think he had a female accomplice who went along with this, or was involved in it. And I don't know whether she had this or not, but in the context of this conversation, there's a relevant phenomenon called hybistrophilia. And hybistrophilia, we talked about a few times here, is it's a fetish, a paraphilia. But it's very much more common in women. Like, it's overwhelmingly more common in women. And it is basically that you require your partner to have committed a outrage, such as rape or murder, in order to achieve orgasm. And also, you are attracted to the qualities of cruelty, sadism, and evil, as well as like dangerous, evil men, right? So there's actually quite a lot of women who have this condition, which maybe is why people like him are able to have female accomplices and girlfriends. But it's also worth noting that many of these serial killers, when they go to prison for like even school shootings, like people like who kill children, like, pedophile murderers, like who killed whatever, like John Wayne Gacy, whatever horrific thing, they get like hundreds of love letters from women. Like, they get like piles of love letters in prison of women who fall in love with them based on their crimes. So it's actually quite a common thing. And there's even women who've smuggled the semen of serial killers out of prison in order so they can have a serial killer's child. It's very bizarre. And this is probably also why shows like what they call murder porn, like the crime scene shows that show crimes of murders are much more popular with women. Probably partly for this reason.
Well, yeah, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Ted Bundy actually has a daughter that was conceived while he was in prison. The woman that he had the daughter with actually ended up marrying him as well, I believe. But she paid the guards money to let her have conjugal visits with him, and bored a child out of those conjugal visits.
So now that we've covered quite a few different killers, their not their motivations necessarily, something of their motivations, product killers, thrill killers, sexual sadists, and we've talked about the different kinds, perhaps we should get into the forensic psychology aspect of this, which is really very interesting. So forensic psychology, forensic is like criminal related, right? Forensic is like law enforcement, basically, more like criminological. And psychology, of course, the study of the mind, the logic of the mind. So let's start getting into how and why people become serial killers. Do you have any thoughts on this, Anna? Like, what are the reasons that some people turn out this way, in your opinion?
So there's always an underlying mental thing with them, but when it comes to a lot of serial killers, their past feeds into this mental illness, whether it be extreme narcissistic personality disorder or just sociopathic tendencies. They very rarely do serial killers have a, let's say, happy past. Like Bundy, when you look at a famous one like Bundy, his childhood molded him to be extremely hateful and aggressive towards women, because he lived in a time where if you were a bastard child, you were frowned upon, and he found out he was a bastard child. His mom didn't know who his father was. Not only that, but she abandoned him at a mother's home and then went back and got her. And then he pretty much grew up being abused by his grandfather, along with his mother being abused by his grandfather. He started hurting women when he was in school, and he had a very, very deep-seated narcissistic personality disorder where you wouldn't be able to say anything negative about him around him, or he would snap essentially into another person. So people who interviewed him actually said his eyes would change colors in anger, like they would go from blue to almost a black. It's quite frightening when you see exactly how far their own mental states will push them to hurt other people and not even feel guilty about it. They feel justified in doing so. One of these cases would be a mother's home that pretty much killed for profit. They would use the fear of having a bastard child to their own benefit, and if a child was, quote, not perfect and couldn't be sold, they would just kill the baby and then bury them. I think they killed like probably 200-300 babies that they found. But both of these people were extremely sociopathic, to where even they abused the mothers and made them pretty much into slave labor while they were there waiting to give birth to their child, and would try to make them in debt. I think they ended up malnourishing one of the mothers while she was pregnant and killing her. But it's mostly just extreme mental illness with a combined with either abuse or lack of positive reinforcements in their life. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. I did disconnect in the last very, very end of what you said there. Just the last sentence. Could you repeat that?
I believe that's a combination of extreme mental illness or sociopathic tendencies with a lack of either positive reinforcement in their childhood and their life, and or extreme abuse to their childhood and their life.
Right. I definitely agree. That's a huge part of it. There are apparently some people who are sociopathic just genetically, or psychopathic. I can never remember which is genetic or biological and which is acquired. But again, a psychopath, let's say, is the one that is genetically inherited. So you might, for some reason, be born without the ability to feel empathy. And some number of people have this. I think they estimate it as whatever, between a few percent to like up to 10% of people. I'm not sure actual number. They don't have empathy, which is the ability to, essentially care about the subjective internal experiences of other people. So they can kick a puppy and not feel bad about it just from birth, basically, some people. And then the other one, probably a sociopath, is acquired psychopathy, generally through trauma and neglect. And this makes sense, right? If you're a baby or a child and you never see someone model caring about anyone else, or your father or whatever just abuses your mother, you never see anybody show concern for other people's feelings and so forth. Well, it's like monkey see, monkey do. You don't develop the ability to socialize normally. So that either of these can happen, right? Genetic abuse. There's another interesting thing. It's called the Dark Triad. Wait, I'm mistaking two things. So first of all, another thing is that head trauma, especially head trauma in childhood, or exclusively maybe head trauma in childhood, it's like a large number of serial killers had a major head injury when they were young. That's like a big factor that apparently comes into play a lot of the time. Obviously totally dysfunctional relationships with the parents, especially I think the mother is a big one. And then I wanted to mention the Dark Triad. So the Dark Triad is the 3 warning signs. And if a child displays these 3 signs, this is considered like a major warning sign that they will become serial killers, right? One is, strangely enough, bedwetting into like later life, like as they get older, if they're still urinating in their bed, for some reason, that strongly correlates with being a serial killer if you piss the bed. Another one is starting fires, right? People who are like arsonists or start fires supposedly. And then the third, I guess unsurprisingly, is harming animals, like especially if you ever find a kid like torturing a puppy or a kitten, or otherwise harming animals. That's a big warning sign. I was working on a farm once, and I saw a little boy pick up that lived on the farm. He picked up a kitten, and he went up to if I'd known, I would have stopped him. Of course, I didn't know what he was going to do. He went up to the top of the barn and he threw the kitten off from the top, right? So it's just, I don't know if that qualifies or not. But, you want to look for that inability to care about animals. And no worries that, cats, they land on their feet. The kitten was okay. But, he got a spanking for that one. So those are 3 warning signs. But I don't know any other explanations. I don't know if anyone else does or...
Yeah, I want to just add something here real quick about empathy, whereas empathy is basically the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes and to feel what they feel. But I can argue that empathy can actually be very useful for certain criminals and psychopaths. In fact, I would argue that the experience of schadenfreude, or feeling joy from someone else's pain, can be highly amplified if you're an empathic person in general. I think it goes deeper than just empathy, and it has to do with like your programming, your mental programming, and what you value. And of course, your inability and I would also add, there is, of course, there's the rational mind and there's the impulsive mind, So perhaps they're very impulsive and they can't control themselves. I mean, I don't know, but I would like to argue that empathy alone does not mean you won't be a psychopath. In fact, I would argue that being empathic could make you a highly effective serial killer.
Like the woman that was behind the jigsaw kill.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like more information, Like when you can put yourself in another person's shoe, it's like you have more information, access to more data. And if you're crazy and you don't care about them, then you can use that information against them, which is why I think that empathy can actually be a bonus for certain crazy serial killers.
Yeah, that would be actually, she would be the perfect argument for that, because she could empathize, but she just didn't care if they died. So she would actually, the way that she pretty much sat down and thought it out was, well, if I was in his place, what would I do? And he did every single thing that she expected him to. which ended up leading to his, death, but she didn't care because she just wanted the money.
And I wanted to build off what Hermes said. I totally agree. And actually, that's something I've thought about before. So, technically speaking, empathy does not inherently lead you to being good or evil. Like you said, it's just the actual ability to feel, in some sense, recognize and feel what the other person is feeling. But as I've said, empathy is the moral vision that we have. But some people become good. And this is like compassion, right? So most of us have compassion, which is that if you see a puppy get kicked, you like wince. And you're like, oh no, the poor puppy. You feel sad and you hurt for it. But sadism or evil is like the other side of that coin. So technically you have to be somewhat sadistic probably to understand the pain you're inflicting on somebody else. So I guess sadism really is sort of like inverted empathy, I think is how I'd look at that. But I just want to say, yeah, I agree with you on that point. Perhaps another thing that we could discuss is the fact that apparently all serial killers have a pattern. And I'm not sure why this would be the case necessarily, but this is how forensic psychologists are able to catch serial killers eventually. Because apparently, I don't know why, all serial killers have a routine, like a pattern. Like they search for victims in certain places. They do that at certain intervals of time. They use a certain weapon. They do it in a certain way. So it seems that serial killers, at least as far as I know, they never just completely operate differently every time they kill. They have like a ritual almost. And that's why they are, why you can catch them. I've often wondered if, there'll ever be an evil genius serial killer who is without pattern, who kills at random intervals of time, random methods, random victims. That's the other thing. Apparently, they always target the same kind of victims. Like, apparently, there aren't very many who just indiscriminately kill whoever. They have, like, a specific kind of victim in mind. And, how and why they settle on that victim, I guess, probably depends on different things. But, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. So, is there anything else, Anna, that you wanted to talk about? Any other killers, any other aspects of serial killing that we're forgetting to look into here?
Jigmo actually just posed a fascinating question. In which sense do you mean the fictional fictional portrayal of serial killers? And are you talking like in their documentaries? Are you talking about in the way people?
I think maybe right, Jigmo.
No, I meant people like Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger, just any fictional character you can think of that's supposed to be a serial killer, and whether it's an accurate portrayal or an inaccurate one.
But an example might be the guy from The Silence of the Lambs, right? What's his name?
Hannibal Lecter, I think.
Yeah.
So I would have to say it's more so they are modeled after people, and sometimes their crimes, certain aspects are put in, but they're not a perfect portrayal. Like, I know that Chainsaw Massacre is based on Ed Gein, and Hannibal Lecter is based also on Katherine Knight and Ed Gein kind of mix. So I think sometimes you'll see the mixture of certain characters, but at the same time, they have different aspects of that killer thrown in, but not a perfect portrayal of that person.
Is there any movie you would recommend as like a very potent, accurate portrayal of a serial killer?
A movie that I would recommend as I would have to get back to you on that one, honestly, because that one.
I have a suggestion, even though I've never seen the movie myself, is American Psycho. It's with Christian Bale, but just from the synopsis and so forth, I've read about it. And again, sorry for recommending a movie I haven't seen, but it is a classic movie. I think that's a pretty realistic serial killer depiction, just based on what I've read there.
Yeah, it's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, and
I could swear that. Sorry, go ahead.
another one would be the first Chainsaw Massacre, because that one is quite accurate to Ed Gein. And not Silence of the Lambs. What's the other one that's like Silence of the Lambs that has the same actor?
There's others in the series, like Red Dragon is, I think, part of the Silence of the Lambs series, but
yeah, and Devil's Rejects are based on a few serial killers, and a cannibalistic family mixed in. They accurately, well, not extremely, but they do kind of portray the family's mindset quite perfectly. And if you ever want one that's for laughs, Trailer Park of Terror. It's not based on any real serial killers. It's a funny horror movie. It's supposed to be funny, but if you like the gore behind all that stuff, Trailer Park of Terror is it's hilarious.
I have a question for you, Anna, and for anybody who wants to weigh in on it. To what extent do you think that serial killers are mentally ill, like crazy, like schizophrenic, or whatever the case may be? And to what extent are they evil? Do you think these people are just morally evil, or are they fundamentally crazy, right? Is it possible to do this kind of stuff and not be mentally ill, or are you automatically mentally ill if you do such things? What do you guys think?
I think that needs to be taken by a case-by-case basis, because you look at Eileen Warren, and she was just crazy. She was out of it. She, to the time she died, she was just insane. I honestly don't think that she could even grasp the severity of what she did. But then you look at the woman that was behind the Jigsaw kill, and she 100% knew what she was doing. She just really didn't care if she killed him in a gruesome way. Then it just has to be taken from a case by case basis, because you can list so many that were just evil and didn't care if they killed people. They just wanted profit, or they wanted what their own satisfaction. But then there are also people that are just so out there, that are just so crazy, that there's no way that they can grasp what they did is even wrong.
Well, very interesting, very disturbing to contemplate. Also worth considering how many serial killers are operating in the world right now who maybe not only haven't been caught, but that their crimes have not really even been recognized. And there's an example of this in Canada. I think it's called the Highway of Tears, or the Highway of Blood. I will try to find a thing of it. But basically, there are so many Aboriginal, First Nations women. Highway of Death, Highway of Tears, yeah. And there's so many Highway of Deaths in Afghanistan. But it's there's so many women that have gone missing there, all First Nations women, that they think there's like potentially 6 different serial killers operating on that highway. And yeah, so there's definitely some serious serial killers at work right now. Yeah, it's called the Highway of Tears. And there's people operating right now, picking up and murdering them. And exactly, so that's all I want to say. Just keep in mind, be careful, be safe. These people are out here. These aren't just like in the past. There's serial killers operating right now. So, I guess one thing we talk about, if you can still hear me, is what do you think people, maybe particularly women, should know about how to avoid, being a victim?
I think the scariest thing about it is there's not much because women are one of the main targets of serial killers. But there's not much that you can really do, because the person that you married to could possibly be one, and you wouldn't know, or you could really trust your friend and they could just be one and we wouldn't really know. There are people who, like, Ted Bundy's a perfect example of this. No one would have ever guessed that he did those gruesome things. But the best way you could stay safe is just always be vigilant, always, make sure that you know where you are, who you're around, and if you have to walk alone, do not have both, earpieces in, don't be listening to loud music, stay vigilant and have a weapon, whether that's a taser, pepper spray, something that you can defend yourself with, because they will target someone that looks like they are weaker than they are. So it's just stay safe.
I agree. And I think I'd like to maybe just add a few other suggestions for women. If you ever meet a guy online, like on Tinder or on, any online platform, Discord, whatever, and you're going to meet, obviously never meet that person in a private place, like in his house or apartment or your house and apartment on the first, time. You want to meet in like a coffee shop or restaurant where there's other people around so that you can sit down with the person, get to know them and get a vibe off them, make sure that they are safe. Also, anytime that you go home with a guy from a bar or whatever the case may be, and you're going to go into his home, before you enter his apartment, before you enter his home, text one of your friends and text the address, right, that you're going to, and say, listen, I'm just going in with a guy. I'm at this address. That way, if something happens, at least they'll know where to go to hopefully find you and rescue you. As regards public places, stay with your friends. Always trust your instincts, always trust your guts. This is one of your gut. This is one of the most important things. A lot of the time people get a warning from their intuition or from their gut, and they don't listen to it because they use their rational mind. And they say, well, rationally, I'm being silly. There's nothing to worry about. Or I don't know why I'm thinking this way. There's nothing to be afraid of. Or, this guy's nice. I'm just being crazy. Always trust your gut. Right? So if you get a bad feeling about a guy, a place, a back alley, a situation, or a scenario, don't question it and don't be like, well, I don't see any rational reason why I feel this way. Just understand that you're probably processing something that is a real threat. So it's very important to trust your intuition. And of course, I do recommend martial arts for men, but women in particular can benefit from this. And of course, be very careful with your drink. Never accept a drink from somebody. Like you're bar and the guy, even if you know like a friend, but especially if you don't. Never take an open drink, right? If someone gives you a drink, it has to be sealed and closed. Otherwise, just go get your own drink. It's not worth it for one drink. To get roofied, this happened to me. Some fucking weird gay guy, I guess, roofied me. And obviously I didn't get not obviously, but still I was completely messed up from it anyways, so be careful of your drinks. I do have more. I have more. If you meet someone online, and it's like he's coming, you're going to go stay with somebody, you need to make sure that they show you on video camera, themselves, so that you can be sure it's not a catfish and it's not some totally different person. But B, they have to provide, if you're a girl, right? If you're a girl and you're going to go stay with a guy or whatever that you met online, he needs to provide all his documentation, photographs of his ID and so forth beside him and so forth. And you need to give that all to your family, right? As well as the address. Make sure you get a visual tour of the place, etc., that you're going to, so that if the guy is a psycho, that you know exactly who he is and that your family does, right? Because one thing that happens is something called Romeo murderers, or not even Romeo, it's really more human trafficking thing. But these guys will make a woman fall in love with them online. The woman will come to stay with them in Europe somewhere, and then it's actually to sex traffic them, and you get abducted and sold. So these are just a few points, since we're talking about predators, that maybe if anyone's listening to this, we can get out to the audience.
Yeah, most definitely, especially when it comes to martial arts, because you get to learn how to use someone's body against them. And it's not about just raw power. You can really mess someone up if you learn martial arts, and you can protect yourself. That is something that I do have to stand behind.
Definitely. And jiu-jitsu is is good in this regard because it's specifically designed to not depend so much on physical strength. You'll be able to break arms and so forth with the proper technique. And actually, it's really good for rape defense. If you know how to throw an armbar up from the bottom, that's something you can do in the physical position you're going to be on when you're on your back, for example, or even a triangle choke. But so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Anna. I was just wondering, do you have maybe a closing message or statement or anything else you want to talk about for this episode?
So my closing statement would have to be, whether you find serial killers fascinating or not, to know how they mentally tick and to know warning signs behind them is something that everyone should know, because it can end up helping you or saving you later on down the road. Everyone will think that will never happen to me, but no one ever really knows. So even though me personally I find this topic fascinating, even if you don't, I would look into how they act, how they pose themselves, and look for warning signs in people that you are meeting for the first time or people that are already around you, just in case. Because there are a lot of serial killers that will kill the people that are close to them when they can't find victims that suit themselves. So that would have to be my closing statement. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sir Anna. It was a great episode. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can do another episode in the future on any topic that you like, either more true crime or something else. Also, I'd like to point out that we have a special event with Jigmo tomorrow. That's going to be at 9 Central, and or 8 Central, sorry. And that'll be the 3rd episode of Philosophy with Jigmo, and it's going to be an introduction to Aristotle. So that should be really good. And we'll have lots more events coming up. Just keep an eye on the announcements channel. And thank you to Saigo. He has compiled all of our RT podcast episodes in the RT podcast channel under important information, chronologically oldest to newest, both BitChute and YouTube. So make sure you check through there and watch some of our great videos that are there. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube and BitChute and subscribe. And you can find all our podcasts there. And of course, join the Roundtable Discord server where you can find everything that we do and all our live events. Thanks so much. And thanks again, Anna. We'll see you guys in Roundtable 1.